These five healthy habits are definitely holding you back from not just dropping fat, but actually optimizing your health and getting to your best. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And this first one I'm going to start with is actually a little bit controversial, right? Because it's eating healthy fats. Now, a lot of people found me through keto and carnivore and everything else, which is great, right? Because I know it's working for a lot of people. But the thing is, when we're adding in these healthy fats, it could be saturated fats that we get from oils and stuff. It could even be the quote unquote, unsaturated fats that we get from olive oil, from avocado, nuts, those kind of things. The problem with those fats is if you're not aware of the amount of calories in them, you're not aware of how they can actually make you gain weight if you're eating those on top of your usual food that you eat, thinking that, right, I'm going to get more nourishment from eating these healthy fats. Another example is MCT oil and bulletproof coffee. I used to have this myself. I used to love it. And yes, you can get ketones and benefits from the short chain fatty acid, right, which is MCT oil. It comes from coconut, for example, and it can buffer the caffeine and stuff like that when you're having your bulletproof coffee. Yes, there's some facts on that. However, it's an extra, whatever it is, 80 to 100 calories in a teaspoon of MCT oil, right? So if you're having that thinking it's healthy and it's going to make you lose fat, actually it's not. And it doesn't make any difference if you're consuming more energy or calories than what you're actually burning off. So I see this happen time and time again where we have this information, which we've got from the keto space, for example, right? And we think, right, if I just add avocado, I eat butter, I have ghee oil, I have all those things on top of the meat that I'm eating. I can have nuts as a snack, for example. We end up just over consuming calories. So let's look at, it's very easy to over consume these things because they're very low satiety generally, these added fats, particularly if you're having nuts for a snack, for example. Having nuts as a snack versus having nuts as part of a meal, for example, let's say you had a handful of almonds with your meal, it's going to be different in terms of how satiated you feel. So there's actually a study on this as well, right? To say, yeah, nuts are satiating in terms of, whole meals, like I said, but as snacks, they actually do make people overeat. And we all know that as well. And it does blow your mind when you're, for example, having a handful of almonds. Let's have a look at a handful of almonds. It's a lot of calories, right? 400 to 500 calories, probably 300 minimum that we're having just by having that as a snack. So we've got to look at fats. Yes, we need them. We need the essential fats to thrive, for energy, for hormone production, for brain cognitive function, all those kind of things. And you would literally get a nasty nutrient deficiency if you were deficient in some of the essential saturated fats in particular. So just because a fat is unsaturated or monounsaturated or polyunsaturated, like you get in omega-3s, for example, doesn't mean that they're necessarily healthy or more healthy than all the different types of saturated fats, which are essential for lots of different things. Obviously, the saturated fats that you get in red meat, for example, and even eggs, which are contained fats, right? They're the fats you get contained in those foods. But these added fats that I'm talking about, so we've got the nuts, we've got the olive oil, we've got the avocado, the butter, those kind of things. There's 9 calories per gram of fat, right? Whereas only 4 calories even in a gram of carbohydrates, to give you an example. Like I said before, there's only 7 calories in a gram of alcohol. That's not to say you should be drinking alcohol to get lean. So what I see is obviously there's a big craze as well with the bulletproof coffee. And like I say, I really enjoyed it for a period of time there. I still enjoy the taste of it. But when we look at actually getting leaner and getting healthier, when we look at fats as well, any additional or excess fats that we have in the diet, remember, when protein and calories are calculated or equated for, fats and carbs make zero difference to body composition. In other words, fat loss. They've actually done studies and they found that someone having a high carb diet with even up to like 300 grams of carbs or even more versus someone having a very low carb diet below 100 grams or even below 50 grams, when they had the right amount of protein, optimal protein, let's say a gram per pound of body weight, and they calculated the calories, as long as the calories were the same, it made zero difference to body composition, right? It's the law of thermodynamics. Now, there is other variables which will play a massive part in your body's ability to lose fat when it comes to if you're eating refined sugars, for example. Not all carbs are treated equally. However, Fats turn into body fat very, very easily in conjunction with excess calories. Let me give you an example. You eat 3,000 calories, your maintenance calories are 2,500. Let's say you eat 3,000 calories on average. That's a 500 calorie surplus, right? If your maintenance calories are 2,500. If those surplus calories have been a lot of fat, right? Let's just for argument's sake, say your diet is over 40% fat, right? If you're having a keto diet, it's 70% fat, right? 70 to 85%. Then your body is going to turn that excess fat into body fat very, very easy. It's a quick process in comparison to what's it called? Deliponeogenesis, I think it's called, right? De novo is a short word for it, I think, which is the conversion of carbohydrates into body fat. So the efficiency rate of fat, dietary fat being converted into body fat is actually going to sit at, give or take, around about 80 to 90% in terms of how efficient that is if you're in a calorie surplus. Whereas carbohydrates are going to be sitting around about 20 to 30% because it's a process. The body has to go through the process that I just mentioned to actually convert it and break it down and metabolize it. Now, protein, that's even harder to turn that into body fat. There is gluconeogenesis, but it's actually really hard for the body to convert that because it obviously burns so much energy and calories just to digest protein. So we need to take that into account, that if we're not aware of how many calories we're eating, if we are just eating willy-nilly, which does work, by the way, this does work for a lot of people. You don't have to track and count calories, not everyone. It can be a good tool to use. A lot of people can get, I've had clients get in amazing shape without tracking, just by giving them a list of foods that you can eat as much as you want, and then a list of foods which you can eat, but you need to be aware of the portion size, right, that you're having with certain foods. And fats go into that category, the added fats, right? If you're having a couple of tablespoons of olive oil and you just don't even think about it, right? Let's say you're cooking your meal and you're having a couple of tablespoons of olive oil or a big teaspoon of ghee oil. You're adding some butter to your eggs. You don't even think about those extra calories of just the added fats, right? Like the oils, for example, and the cooking oils. That adds up to like well over 1,000 calories in most cases over the space of a week. Thousands of calories in some cases. So being aware of those things in terms of getting leaner and metabolic health is very, very important, right? So we got to look at the empty calories. Because I had a client recently, right? And it was a simple win for us to lose body fat. He was having MCT oil, right? And we were trying to hit a certain target with calories. I've had him track him for the first month of coaching him. So we took that away, and then that basically meant that he had an extra, it was like 800 calories at the end of the week to play with, right? So that way then it wasn't a case of cutting down calories too low. It was a case of, like personally for me, I prefer to eat 800 calories, an extra amount of steak, for example, or even maybe even a little bit of dark chocolate sometimes, right? Instead of the oils. So let's really bear that in mind. Look at the satiety per gram. So obviously Ted Nyman talks about this, right? Satiety per gram. We look at protein. We have a lean cut of meat. Let's just say, I don't know, chicken breast, or let's just use beef, for example, right? You have a steak or beef mince or whatever. The satiety per calorie is going to be high, right? Especially if you have lean beef mince, for example, or a lean cut of steak, or let's just say chicken breast, for example, or even whitefish like tilapia or cod, those kind of things. It's really high protein and actually really low calories, right? So you look at, for example, 100 grams of, let's just say, chicken breast, for argument's sake. What are you looking at with calories there? You're probably looking at around about 60 to 70 calories, give or take, right? Give or take. I'm just off the top of the head here. Whereas if you have, for example, a protein bar, let's say a protein bar, for example, this is going to have, let's say a gram, let's say in 100 calories, you would have, in 100 grams of a protein bar, for example, they're normally, what are they about? How much do they weigh normally? 40, 50 grams? You're going to have loads more calories, 5 times the amount of calories. Plus, you can eat it way quicker as well because it's like 3 bites in a protein bar, right? So we've got to look at the energy and satiety per gram, okay? But yeah, those fats got to be really mindful of that. So what's the solution to that? The solution is, number one, to look at, if you get, for example, if you're someone who's plateaued with your weight loss and your fat loss, you got to look at, where am I going wrong? And where you're going wrong, if you get either one, gain in fat, or you've plateaued with fat. If you gain in fat, you're simply consuming more than you're eating. There's loads of different variables we know with metabolism and hormones. Yeah, all those things impact your metabolism and your body's ability to basically exert calories, right? And burn calories and metabolize them and burn them off, right? Just to put it in simple terms. But you essentially just consuming more than you're burning, right? It's very simple. Your body is, you're taking in more energy than your body is actually burning. The end, right? It's as simple as that. And it's very simple to do that if you're someone, if you're eating processed foods, which I'll get to, yes, those foods are designed to make you overeat. I'm going to get to that soon. But just by having those excess fats and adding those oils, adding all those healthy fats, if you find yourself gaining weight, you need to start monitoring those fats and then potentially take away, just reduce eating some of the added fats which you don't need. You're getting all the essential fats that you need through eggs, through grass-fed beef, for example. You're getting a lot of the omega-3s through the salmon, through the sardines, those kind of foods. So you don't actually need to add those fats anyway. So even if you just reduce them by about 50%, you'll probably lose weight, right? Or at least just only use added fats. For example, if we say nuts, olive oil, avocado, only use added fats like ghee oil, for example, or beef tallow, which are way better than olive oil anyway, to cook a little bit. And that's it. Cut out all the other added fats. Like I have dark chocolate. An example is dark chocolate. I have that, and I know I can get away with it. So I take the piss. I've been eating like 80 grams of 90% to 100% dark chocolate. That's like, how many calories is that? Like 500 calories a day I'm eating, and added fats that I don't need. I know that. Right. And I said to Janini the other day, actually, I said, look, if I wanted to get leaner now, which I don't, I would just cut out the dark chocolate. Boom, I'm going to get leaner. So you can apply that as well to the added fats. All right. Number 2, this is a controversial one for sure, is the high protein processed snacks. Now, I always say to clients, right, there's 2 different types of foods. There's complete foods, there's incomplete foods. Snacks that come out of a packet are incomplete foods. Now, why are they incomplete? Let's look at protein. Right? People think that protein is like a magical macronutrient, right? And it's fantastic marketing, but also we're a bit dumb as humans. Let's just be honest, right? Because I bought into it for a while myself, right? Oh, it's got the word protein on it. Must be healthy. Let's go for it, right? Not the case. So when you're getting high protein snacks that come out of a packet, even protein bars, for example, a lot of them, number one, don't have complete protein sources. For example, you might see protein isolate or soy protein and those kind of things, but they're not going to have the complete proteins generally that whole foods and some of the most nutrient dense foods in general known to man, such as even milk, or let's say whole milk. Not low fat, whole milk. Well, even low fat's going to contain the same amount actually in terms of proteins. It's going to have leucine. It's going to have, there's 9 essential amino acids, right? And you're going to find in, for example, whey protein isolate, which is derived from milk, right? Let's just use milk as the example. You're going to get the essential. There's 9 essential amino acids. You're going to get the main 3, right? Which is leucine, the main 3 are leucine, isoleucine and valine, I think are the main 3. But anyway, the 9 main amino acids that you have to get from diet, you're going to find all of them pretty much in those foods, right? So you're going to have leucine, which is the main one, obviously for health and for muscle protein synthesis, right? And also you're going to get things like casein in there as well, which can be good for satiety because it's slow releasing in milk. And you get similar amounts in whey protein isolate as well, which is derived from milk, right? So you're going to get those complete protein sources. Same goes for like beef, for example, right? You're going to get all the essential amino acids, obviously leucine, lysine, methionine. I can't really pronounce that one. Not to mention the nutrients and the fats like carnitine, creatine, B12, and those kind of things, right? Which you're going to get from beef. So cut a long story short, they're not complete protein sources with these high protein snacks. And people fall into these traps. There's another massive trap with any foods that come out of a packet, including quote unquote high protein snacks, is by law, especially in America. Hopefully this will change soon with the new bloody president and all that kind of stuff, right? And what's his name? Not JFK, Kennedy guy. But anyway, they're allowed to be 20% out by labels, right? So that means they're always going to put the calories lower than what they are. Of course, they just want to sell more product. So when you're having protein bars even, or protein crisps, or protein cereal, or protein bread, all these things, you're likely eating way more calories than what you account for and what it says on the packet because they're allowed to be 20% out. That's a big one. You got to remember that, right? And with clients, I always get them to be aware of these things. And it's really, really important. But if we look at like blood sugar spikes and we look at, UPF and highly palatable foods. When we look at protein bars, there's some out there which are better than others, but anything that comes out of a packet, any snacks like that, look at it as incomplete meal versus complete meal. Now, is it okay to have them from time to time? Great. Yeah. I guess some clients having those when they're on the move, like the odd protein bar here and there. But if you're doing that all the time, you're not having a complete meal. And not only that, a lot of these things, they're only designed, even the healthier ones, what do they want to do? They want to make money. Let's just get to the bottom line here. Yeah, there might be one or two companies out there that really do care about health and real ingredients, but they want to make money. That's the bottom line. Profit. Okay. So they want the food to taste good. That's what they want these high protein snacks and bars to do, is to taste good so we can buy more product. Let's be honest. Yes, sometimes it's convenient having protein bars. The reason we have these things is because they taste good. Let's just cut the bullshit and just say, look, I'm having this because I like the taste. That's what I value the most, is the taste. I could eat beef. I could be more prepared. I could have these foods instead, like a meal, but instead I choose to have this. Again, every now and then you have these things when you're on the move, traveling, those kind of things. And obviously I have a system which I use with clients when they travel or they have vacations, those kind of things. A more complete snack, for example, alternative would be things like boiled eggs, beef jerky, good quality ones, are not garbage. Most of these beef jerkies are UPF, the ultra processed foods. They contain maltodextrin and loads of garbage. Have a look at the ingredients on the back. Get good quality beef jerky, right? Like an organic one or a grass-fed one. They're more expensive, but if you're on the move, it literally should have beef, grass-fed beef ideally, salt, and not much else in there. If it's got anything else in there, a lot of the times it's going to be UPFs. Just be mindful of that, especially maltodextrin, which they add in there, which is a joke. That's one of the worst things you can consume, right? Boiled eggs, those kind of things, right? Protein powder, of course, is going to be, if you get a good quality whey protein, that's going to be a better kind of snack if you can do that when you're on the move, having a protein powder with you. That's going to be a win as well, right? But we want to be having complete meals. So we look at ultra processed foods as well. Most of these high protein snacks, well, pretty much 90% of them are going to be UPF. They're going to have chemicals in there which are not food. They're chemicals, right? They can have additives in them, and they even trick you with words like natural flavors. That is an additive. It's a chemical, and they just sugarcoated it with the word natural on there. And even I used to overlook that one, right? Now, you don't have to get too extreme and obsessed with this, but you just got to be aware of those foods, right? They're designed to make you eat more of them. And in terms of satiety per calorie, again, going back to what I said, they're really energy gen. So you can have a protein bar, it's probably, let's just say 200 calories. They're about this big, right? They're tiny. They're like, 3 inches long. And essentially they contain 200 calories, right? So complete meals over incomplete meals, and they can make you actually slow down your results. Why? 20%, remember, just to summarize, they can be out on the labels with those foods. 2, they're highly palatable, so they're going to promote behaviors with food which are not ideal, such as you being purely driven by how the food tastes instead of how you feel when you eat foods, and looking at food as fuel instead of taste if you're eating too much of those foods. 3, obviously, they're going to impact gut flora and stuff as well. These high protein snacks, the breads, the crisps, even the bars, because again, they've got things like emulsifiers in them as well, a lot of them, like even lecithin or soy lecithin. It's an emulsifier. Research shows these emulsifiers completely change your gut microbiome, and they actually your gut creates new cells which stimulate appetite, essentially, with these emulsifiers. They're a nightmare, right? So every now and then, cool, but definitely these high protein snacks put people into a big trap. And I see people who have these things, essentially, when you're having those things regular, it's ultra processed foods. So if you're having 90%, sorry, let's just say you want to be having no more than 10% of your plate or the foods that you eat on a weekly basis or daily basis, you want to be UPF. So if you're having a lot of these high protein snacks, basically you're going to take that percentage down. Then on top of that, you know, sometimes you want to eat certain foods on the weekends or eat out. And then when you add it all up, you're probably having like, you know, 40% UPF. You're never going to get into great shape when you're having that much UPF. Number one, you don't know how many calories you're having because they can be way out. Number two, they're designed to make you eat more. There was a study done here in Australia, actually, in 2019. I mentioned it before, but long story short, it was a cross study as well, right? So what they did is you got two groups. They controlled for the macros, made the macros the same. And they said, basically, eat as much as you want of these real foods to hit these macros, whole foods, and eat as much. And the other group was eat as much as you want of these ultra processed foods. So for example, in the whole foods, they were having things like oats, by the way. They were having, I think they might have even been having like things like wholemeal pasta and stuff like that, maybe even. So it was like pretty much whole foods, but not quite, but pretty much. And they were having, you know, just fruits, meats, all those kind of things, right? Vegetables. In the other group, then they were just having cereals, refined sugars, right? White bread, and just, you know, junk food, essentially, a lot of it. And the UPF group, they ate 500 over 500 calories more than the whole food group when they give them unlimited access to those foods. And they crossed the study. It was a cross study, crossed the groups over to take account for individual variance, which is a lot of with humans, right? And the same thing happened, right? 500 calories more a day. That's 3,500 calories a week. That works out. That's about a pound of fat that works out on the scales you would gain a week. So just remember, those foods are designed to keep us on the back foot and keep us overweight and sick. Well, essentially, I mean, they don't think of it that way. They just want to make more money. But as a side effect, that's what happens. Look, before I get into points 3, 4, and 5, I'm going to be giving away my peak performance blueprint for anyone who's looking to melt fat, particularly around the midsection, build muscle, and get drastic strength gains. I'm giving this away. It gives you a nutrition blueprint and meal plans, and everything is all in there. And also it teaches you an understanding of how to calculate the right calories and macros for your body type and your goals. And it's got this training program I put in there. It's got hundreds of people in shape, just the training program. Insane, proper strength training using all the OYB concepts, using frequency as the main variable, right? The main driver, because as Stan Efferdin said, that's what gets you results, training the body parts frequently. So so basically click the link beneath to get that for free. If you want to lose fat, build muscle, and get in great shape over the next, even within 4 weeks, you're going to notice great results. The other thing is, wow, this is big. I'm doing a live masterclass. It's called the Optimize Your Body Mid-Year Reset, and it's going to help you put an end to the all or nothing mentality, right? With food, with everything, essentially. And it's for my clients. I always design these for my clients first and foremost. And it's going to give you a system. And basically what I'm going to do, long story short, I'm going to show you exactly what you need to do to train to get maximum results, minimum time, a nutrition game plan to help you fit that into your busy lifestyle. Because I know most of you are high performers, successful, and just get after it in your career. So I'm basically going to teach you how to stay in shape when you're traveling or when you have client meetings or even vacations or those kind of things. I'm going to give you a habits, basically a way to monitor your health and habits and everything else. It's going to be gold. So if you want to get into great shape and you want to reset yourself, because it's halfway through the year now, you want to finish the summer on top form, in good shape, feeling confident and full of energy, as opposed to getting to September and feeling like dog shit and being out of shape, low on energy, and feeling down on yourself, right? Come along to this masterclass. And I've left my Instagram in the show notes beneath the Peak Performance Blueprint. Click that and drop me a DM on Instagram with the word reset, and I will give you a seat. I'll basically keep a seat free for you for this live masterclass. So getting into number 3, intuitive eating. All right. So a lot of people, you may have heard intuitive eating versus basically tracking calories. It's almost like there's always 2 camps in nutrition, right? Where there's like the one camp where it's like, I just eat what I feel like I need to eat to get in shape. And there's the other camp then is like macros and calories. You want to be somewhere in between. Like I say, you can use tracking as a tool. But the thing is with intuitive eating is without structure, what it does is most people just say they just eat what their body feels like it needs. And ultimately, most people left to their own devices, number one, they eat way more. They eat like 30 to 50% more than what they report. This has been proved time and time again in studies. because most people eat 8 times. They say they eat 3 times a day, but they eat 8 times, including snacks and everything. So they eat way more. Number two, they got no understanding of how to control calories and portion size. So they just eat based on what their body feels, right? And there's no way you can do that unless you've been through a process of at least being aware of portion sizes, eating primarily whole foods, 90% of whole foods. Most people say they eat healthy and they justify things like intuitive eating, but they actually have zero awareness of any of the stuff I've talked about in terms of like, oh yeah, I eat um I make really good choices because today, I had healthy meals for breakfast. I had a fruit smoothie. For lunch, I had a sandwich, a chicken sandwich. And then for dinner, I had some, I'm using the extreme example here, by the way, of someone who has no understanding whatsoever, probably taking it a bit too far. And for dinner, I had some brown rice and I had some vegetables with a little tiny bit of meat. And it's like, most people are grossly under eating protein. They have no idea what a high protein diet looks like. And essentially, as a result of that, they overeat. On the flip side of intuitive eating, self monitoring, right? Been proven time and time again in research. For example, tracking and weighing your food, weighing yourself, paying attention to portion guides. For example, having 1 or 2 palm size amounts of meat with your meal, or say 1 palm size of meat, 1 palm size of vegetables, and then maybe like a little finger size of fats, for example, on your plate. That's just an example. They consistently not just lose more fat, but they actually keep the fat off. So they basically manage to sustain it when they're big on self-monitoring, right? Which is why with our clients, obviously we do the photos, we do the body stats, we keep track of those things. We can use tracking food as a tool, yes, but the end goal is always to be able to, I don't want to even say eat intuitively, right? Because again, it's not used the right way. The end goal is to be able to make automatic decisions with your food without having to track, of course, right? So, yeah. So basically, when it comes to holding people back and ruining people's fat loss and even health along the way, and not only that, what happens is when people they don't want to do the hard stuff, they want to avoid the difficult feelings of, look, I'm not making progress and I don't want to look at portion sizes. I don't want to understand what works in terms of tracking food. And, I don't even want to do that for 7 days. I eat healthy, but something's not working. It's not working. I've plateaued my fat loss or I'm gaining weight. It's an easy cop out, right, for a lot of people to say that. And look, I've got compassion here as well, right? But when people are spending years stuck in that cycle of gaining fat or whatever, and then just going, I can't figure it out. But they've never had that awareness to, number one, hit a protein target, because people say they eat high protein and they eat, a bit of cheese, a handful of nuts, and maybe one piece of meat in a day. And they're having, let's say 80 grams of protein as opposed to maybe 150 grams, right? They need double the amount they're having if they want optimal amounts to blunt their appetite and ultimately to not overeat. Simple as that, right? So that's a big one, the intuitive eating thing. It's like a lot of people just use that as an excuse. I'm going to eat what I want to eat, what my body feels it needs. Okay, well, what are most people going to do when they do that? I'm just going to go and eat a burger and Domino's and that. I know what my body needs. Well, great. If you're in amazing shape physically, mentally, you're thriving, fantastic. But most people are not. So that's not going to be the answer, right? All right, number 4, controversial one again, right? Fasting. So long story short, right, there's a lot of benefits to fasting. Like I do intermittent fasting every day, and I don't look at it as intermittent fasting, though. I just look at it as I feel better in a fasted state in the mornings. I can get more work done, and it works for my lifestyle. I hit protein easy, so I eat enough protein over 2 meals, no problem. I eat loads of meat, copious amounts, like more than 95% of people. I love having 2 meals with loads of beef, for example, and steak. Love it, right? I can hit 300 grams of protein in 2 meals, no problem. 99% of people, 95% minimum, cannot do that. So what happens when people fast without having that foundation of eating, number one, real foods, at least 90% of the time. Number two, having enough protein over those meals, over that 1 or 2 meals, or whatever they're having. And number three, actually using it for the wrong reasons, right? So I honestly am going to stand by this statement of I think fasting is a terrible idea when it comes to using fasting for weight loss. Now, if you say, right, I'm going to eat in a smaller window because I eat less calories that way, I find it easier to eat less. If I do that, great. And that works for fat loss, I'm with that. But when people say, right, I'm going to fast to lose weight, it's the wrong approach because most people have struggled to restrict calories. They've struggled with weight fluctuations and maybe yo yo dieting for a number of years. And then when they say, right, I'm going to essentially fasting is another word for I'm going to restrict, right? I'm going to go without food, right? Simple as that. And obviously, when it comes to physiologically and your health and neurogenesis and autophagy, we could go down the list of all the health benefits that you can get when you fast appropriately. And I say appropriately because fasting's an added stress, and most people have plenty of stress going into that stress bucket, and it overflows a lot for most people, and they're not even aware of it. And then they add in fasting, going without food. Not ideal, right? Not ideal. So all that to say, number one, the reason why it's a big problem and ruining a lot of people's fat loss when it comes to sustainable fat loss and keeping the weight off is because they haven't built that foundation and they haven't got to a point where they're consistently over the space of a year. I'm not talking like 12 weeks. That's why I hate these short-term studies. It's just BS because most people gain all the weight back they lost within 1 to 2 years. So we got to look long-term here. So through all seasons over the space of 12 months, for example, has that person who's fasting actually got to a point where they've built a healthy relationship with food? They're naturally eating a good amount of protein, good amount of, whole meat, for example, and fiber ideally, and vegetables and foods like that, which do keep you satiated, providing you can digest them and all those kind of things. Have they got to a point where they're even aware, for example, of how much protein they're eating and how much they need? For example, even tracking just protein, not calories, for a week. So they know, right, I'm eating a gram per pound of body weight, or whatever that is. I'm eating 150 grams a day. Most people are just guessing their way to success, right? So it doesn't work unless you've got that foundation. You're eating primarily whole foods naturally, automatically. You have less desire to have ultra processed foods, and you've managed to stay in shape for or at least if you're looking to lose weight like most people, you managed to get into really good shape, or at least lose fat and keep it off for longer than say 2 years, then great. Some people it works for though, right? There's always that minority, but I'm talking to the masses here. It can actually increase binging as well, right? I've seen this happen time and time again, where people have had issues with, even if it's not binging, but emotional eating and, eating based on emotions, right? Like stress, anxiety, boredom, those kind of things. And then they've got a good amount of stress coming into their life and they decide, right, I'm just going to have one meal a day. Great. You're just adding fuel to the fire. And how are you going to hit the protein target in one meal? Most people are not going to do that, right? And when they don't get into that habit and cement the habit in of naturally eating like at least 30 to 50 grams of protein with every single meal, in the case of having one meal a day, let's say you're a woman, for example, who weighs 120 pounds, or you want your goal weight to be 120 pounds even, right? Because it is better to do, actually it's more confusing when you do goal weight. You can say gram protein per pound of goal weight, but just say total body weight. You weigh 120 pounds. And you're going to get that into one meal. Oh man, hard to do, right? Especially for women. I find women find it harder to get protein in and eat more meat. Men find it a bit easier. Over 2 meals even, it's kind of hard to get 60 grams in each meal, right? For most people. And that's it. So it's harder to get that protein in when you're eating less frequently, number one. And if you don't get the protein in and you don't make that a habit, then naturally you want to replace the calories that you haven't had with what? Fats and carbs, right? Because the body, all it wants to do is stay in homeostasis, right? And it doesn't want to lose weight. That's the thing with the body. It doesn't want to lose weight. It wants to stay right where it is, right? It'll fight against that. That's why you got to be smart with this approach. Now, like I said, it can work when protein is kept high and resistance training is present. This is a big one. When people just fast and they don't resistance train, just like when people go into a big calorie deficit, because that's what they do, right? They fast, they eat less, and they go into a big calorie deficit. And if they're not doing strength training on top of that to at least retain or build muscle at a minimum, they're going to pare down at least 40% of that generally on average if you lose weight quick, like a lot of people do when they fast and stuff, because they go from one extreme to another, eating mainly UPF and struggling with your weight. I'm going to fast because Susie said she lost weight. And by the way, I'm not trying to look down on anyone this is work for. If it's working for you, I'm all for it. Keep doing it. Again, speaking to the masses. So when you do that, then you pare down mainly muscle, lean body mass. 40% of it on average when you lose weight quick is going to be lean body mass if you're not doing proper strength training and you're not having high protein, right? So that's a big problem. Why is that a problem? Because if you lose lean body mass and muscle, muscle is metabolically expensive tissue, right? It costs your body a lot of calories to keep it on your body. You pare it down, that means your metabolism slows down and you can get away with less food again, right? Which then means it's really easy to overeat, or at least when life gets in the way. This is what happens to most people when it comes to weight loss. Life gets in the way at some point, a stressful event happens, you're traveling with work, some shit happens like it always does. And if you haven't got that bulletproof foundation, then people end up going back to old behaviors. And then boom, they gain their weight back real quick because they haven't developed their metabolism and built muscle, right? And really focused on that for a period of time, or at least strength training at least for a number of years, at least a year, consistently and appropriately for their body, right? So fasting can be a good tool, but it's definitely a problem for most people when it comes to losing weight and keeping it off. The only people that should fast is, like, for example, when I use my clients as an example, I've probably got there's not many clients who fast daily, right? I've got a few, don't get me wrong, but I would say only about 20% of my clients, maybe about 20% of my clients intermittent fast, right? Where they have like 2 meals a day and like they eat like me, where they don't eat in the mornings and they feel better doing that. They eat lunch and they eat dinner. All the rest of them just have the usual kind of 3 meals a day. And there's more science to show as well when it comes to building muscle. It's splitting hairs a little bit, but if you want to build muscle and that's your goal, eating within, say, 2 to 4 hours after training, like maximum, or even within an hour or two, ideally for muscle protein synthesis. There is some research on that. I think it's splitting hairs, but if I was looking to build muscle and that was my main goal, then I would definitely add an extra meal in. I would have 3 meals. It's easier to eat enough. Muscle protein synthesis, right? So after training, ideally within an hour or two, if you feel hungry after that, get the protein in, right? But you don't want to be pushing that either, right? I tend to eat my meal normally like 2 to 4 hours after training, right? Like 4 hours after, probably on average. When I think about it, because I train in the morning, I train about 7 a.m., finish training at 8, yeah, and I'll eat about midday, right? And muscle's not going to fall off your body, by the way, right? In fact, your body's in a fat burning zone when you fast after training, but that's great for fasting, for fat loss, providing you're staying within the right calories and stuff. But if you want to build muscle, you want to get that extra meal in, right? So remember, fasting, not going to be ideal for building muscle for most. It's hard to eat enough. It's hard to get enough protein in. Building muscle is the key to longevity. If you want to live longer and you want to add life to your years as well, it's not just about living longer, right? It's like as you get older, it's critical for you to have as much muscle mass as you possibly can on your body. Muscle is the longevity organ, right? And actually, it's the biggest organ on the body. So I think it's around about like, forget what it is now, maybe 20% or something. I forgot what the numbers are now. Around about that, give or take, is skeletal muscle. It might be 16%, 70% of your body is so it's the biggest organ in the body, because about that much of your body as a whole is muscle. So, and strength as well. The number one indicator to how long you're going to live is how physically strong you are, the grip test, right? The strength grip test, how strong your grip is. So we need to make that a priority, right? So long story short, fasting, and I want to touch on this as well for women. There's loads of research on this now, right? Excessive fasting can really disrupt hormones, thyroid, menstrual cycle, cortisol elevated, of course. And it just doesn't work well for fasting for most women. There's loads of new research on this as well now. It's not good for, especially aging women, as you get older and you get, say past 35 and towards, when you have perimenopause, all those kind of things, all those hormonal changes, when estrogen levels drop and all those kind of things, it's terrible for a woman. In fact, it's for women, especially aging women. I get, some of the clients I've coached to aim to have, and I've got feedback off them as well, having like whey protein, for example, before they train, maybe mixed with a little bit of fruit right before, is even better then, because that's going to help you retain muscle, because you've got amino acids in for your training session before training, and it gives them more energy as well. And it prevents any muscle wastage at a minimum, right? So you want to prevent that at all costs, because obviously you are going to be paring down amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks for muscles, right? So anyway, that was a bit of a tangent there, but cut a long story short, fasting done the wrong way basically will make a lot of people gain weight long term because they can't keep it going, number one. Number two, they don't get enough protein in. Number three, they're still eating too much ultra processed foods. And even if they're not eating much ultra processed foods when they fast, if they go back to eating those foods and they come away from the fasting and the on or off mentality with diet, they gain the weight back. But it can be a great tool for some people. All right. Let me finish this off with a training thing here, right? So number 5 is excess cardio, holding people back from losing fat and getting healthier. So again, I've explained this a few times, right? I want to be clear here. I'm not anti-cardio. If we go back to the longevity piece, VO2 max, how fit you are, your cardiorespiratory capacity essentially, is going to be another big indicator to how long you live, like what your VO2 max score is, right? So doing some kind of zone 4, for example, cardio where, once or twice a week where you're doing sprints, for example, can be good for longevity and health. Although I would argue when you're lifting weights properly, like the way I train, I get my heart rate into that zone with training, specifically, basically lifting weights, I mean. So basically what I want you to look at cardio as a tool, a great tool for health. Cardio is great for health. Look at cardio as health, longevity, and even improved performance of strength training. When you get fitter, it carries over into strength training and it benefits you in the gym because you have more stamina, better lung capacity, etc. But when it comes to fat loss, right, if you look at cardio as you could use that as a tool, for example, HIIT cardio in a small minority of cases, very small minority. I've got, maybe a client using HIIT cardio for 3 to 4 weeks to lose that little bit of fat they wanted to lose. And that's it then. They use it as a tool and they come away from it. But the main way to lose fat is going to be from diet and strength training, right? And in terms of calorie output, how much you move throughout the daytime, right? NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That's your daily movement. How much you're moving, not necessarily walking. Yeah, that's classed as NEAT, but just how much you're moving around and how many steps you do. For example, if you're tracking your steps, that's the most of your biggest opportunity to burn calories is going to be what you're doing day to day, not the hour you're on the treadmill in the gym. To give you an example, right, when it comes to fat loss and why this could be holding you back. Let's say you're choosing to go to the gym and do an hour of cardio to get in shape, right? Not for health. If you just go into the gym to do cardio purely for health, right? Great, fantastic. If you go in there to do cardio for results as opposed to doing strength training, then you are going to get suboptimal results. So when you go to the gym and you do cardio, for example, for an hour, let's just say you do the cross trainer or walk on the treadmill, give or take, not very good at maths. That's about 5% of your day, give or take, right? Roughly 24 hours in a day. 5%, maybe 4 or 5% of your day, you've burned calories, right? By being on the treadmill, for example, or doing cardio. Whereas when you go and lift weights for even 45 minutes, an hour is a bit long for most, 45 minutes of lifting weights, your metabolism's elevated afterwards, right? The afterburn is high. It's called EPOC, right? Exercise post-oxygen consumption. Long story short, the afterburn from lifting weights, in other words, your body's burning more calories after lifting weights for, let's just say 10 to 12 hours, even up to 24 hours, 48 hours after, but especially after 10 to 12 hours after, say 12 hours to get the maths easy. So that's 12 hours, right? Half a day, 50% of your day, your body's burning more calories versus that 5%. So when you get off that treadmill, you stop the cardio, the burn stops. You don't burn calories. Your metabolism goes back to where it was because you're manually burning calories. That's a manual output of calories, manual exertion. Whereas lifting weights, your body, when you sit down at your desk and you're working 12 hours after, definitely 12 hours after, even up to 24 hours after, muscle protein synthesis kicks in and your body's burning more calories because it's a stress. It's a metabolic stress on the body, right? When you're lifting weights, long story short. So that's why it's way more effective for fat loss because your body's constantly burning more calories, number one. Number two, to actually, get the most out of your strength training, naturally it's the whole pursuit of that, right? You have to have high protein and stuff like that, right? But when we look at there's been studies done, right, on obesity, for example, right? And they found resistance training is by far superior to aerobic exercise for preserving lean body mass in a calorie deficit. So that's another thing. If you're going to do loads of cardio whilst being in a calorie deficit, Cardio, it sends a signal to pare down tissue, right? To break down tissue, fatty tissue, but also lean body mass, muscle mass. Whereas strength training is pro tissue, right? It sends a signal to build, providing you're eating right and you're getting the protein in. So that's the signal you want to be sending if you want to lose fat and keep it off. It will be killing your fat loss if you're trying to use cardio, you're doing excessive cardio to lose fat and keep it off. And that's the other big one, right? To keep it off. A lot of people, they do excess cardio, they might lose some fat short term, but long term, they gain it back because the metabolism adapts when you're manually burning more calories by getting more efficient with calories. In other words, it says, right, Martin, for example, I'm going on the treadmill. Martin's burning calories manually and he's burning a lot of calories. How do I survive? Right, I got to slow down. I gotta get more efficient and store energy better. Whereas if your muscle tissue is expensive, right, it costs your body a lot of calories to keep it on your body. So you're lifting weights. It's going to cost your body calories to keep the muscle on your body, but also, like I say, the afterburn, right? Plus, high intensity training is going to elevate cortisol and everything else, right? Which is going to increase fat storage, particularly around the belly, right? There's loads of research on that. Elevated cortisol and fat storage around the belly. And because obviously hormones, even one hormone could be out and it's going to affect your body's ability to burn muscle, to burn fat and to lose weight and your metabolism and everything, right? So look at too much intense cardio is going to be leading to muscle loss, hormone disruption, potentially burnout, and certainly it's going to store your fat loss, or you might even gain fat if you're overdoing it, right? Having high protein, lifting weights on the other hand, focusing on movement throughout the daytime, focusing on that as most of what you're doing, let's say 80 to 90% of what you're doing, boom. That's what's going to get you sustainable fat loss, right? So mic drop there, ladies and gents. I'm going to wrap it up here. Check out this next video, right? 3 healthy foods, quote unquote healthy foods, which we think are healthy, which are potentially, well, if you're eating them, they're definitely holding you back from getting to the next level in terms of getting lean. So definitely check this next video out. You get a ton of value from that. And yeah, I'd love to know what you thought of this episode. Please comment beneath with what you thought of the episode. I'd love your feedback, or if you've got any questions, hit me beneath. And just one more reminder, my Instagram handle is in the show notes. Click that if you want to come to the live mid-year reset training. DM me with the word reset and I'll keep you a seat. And also the Peak Performance Blueprint is beneath in the show notes. Speak soon.